Sean, what's up, brother? Good to have you back. Two times in what, 3 weeks now? I think it is, or 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, on a roll
Kip,
here.
Kip, he felt a little bad about us making fun of him, but he said, he can hang, he can handle it. So we won't pick on him today. We'll leave him alone. I think he's vacationing with his family right now. So we'll let him do his thing.
Yeah.
Vacation in peace.
When you have a spike in views, you just got to roll with it, right?
What with having you on, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. 100%. That's actually, if you guys want to know the truth, I asked Kip to take a vacation from the podcast to have Sean back on it. Regardless, man, it's good to have you here. I got a lot of good feedback when you came on a couple of weeks ago. A lot of good responses and people reached out and messaged me. So it has been good to have you here. But let's get right into the questions today because we got a lot of good ones. And I think, let's see, these ones are coming from the Iron Council. Guys, by the way, let me throw this out here real quick. If you don't know what the Iron Council is, or you've been sitting on the fence for some time now, make sure you check it out because we are going to be opening up in about 2 weeks. So middle of March, we're going to open it up and we'll probably only have it open for a week or two, depending on how many people get enrolled. So if you want to know, just go to orderofman.com/Iron Council and you'll get the update and you'll be the first to be notified. So orderman.com/Iron Council. Sean, that beard's looking pretty tight, man. Did you get that thing cleaned up and trimmed up? Because you're looking sharp.
I did. I can't do that on my own yet. I haven't figured it out, but yeah, I found
Neither
a good
can
barber.
I, clearly. So I can get the neckline pretty cleaned out, but anything up here, forget about it. So I just let it roll. All right, man. Yeah. Let's get into the questions. What's the first one today?
All right. First one's from Bobby Katie. Says, what's the most physically challenging thing you both have done in your life so far?
So I saw these questions beforehand because I do try to be somewhat prepared, believe it or not. My answers don't always lend to that, but I do try to be prepared for these things. There's two things that immediately came to mind. One was a short-term event and other was a long-term part of my life. So the most physically demanding event or activity that I've ever done was
this thing.
Yeah, thing. Yeah, I would say would be the Spartan and Gogi. So that's a 60-hour endurance event. And yeah, it's designed to just break you down. And I can't remember, we had 120 or so, I think, participants. And I think, gosh, I can't even remember. We might have ended up with like 80 or so, 80 or 90. It seemed like 25 to 30% of the people dropped out of it. But yeah, that was a challenge. 60 hours of just getting your butt kicked. A lot of people think of Spartan races as the racing portion of it, the running portion of it. This one was a lot different. There was a little bit of running here and there, but we stayed up the whole 60 hours. No, I think we got 2 hours of sleep in that 60-hour time frame, which might have actually been worse than getting no sleep. And then we were pushing big hay bales up hills in this muddy bog swamp, going up and down hills, making makeshift stretchers to carry people that were, wounded, just so we could work that stuff out. We ate bugs. Like I ate mealworms and earthworms. Have you ever eaten either of those?
No.
Brutal, dude. Brutal.
Could only imagine.
We had a survival portion of the class where, they taught you different plants and animals that you could eat if you needed to. And yeah, mealworms weren't bad. Earthworms were disgusting, clearly.
That's like Fear Factor stuff. You see that? Anything physically challenging, I could care less. But when they have to eat bugs and stuff, I'm like, heck no.
No way. So that was tough. And then the only other thing that I would say was that was a little bit longer of a time frame. Basic training was kind of challenging. I guess that wasn't that bad, though. I'm trying to think back about it. That was 22 years ago. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. The guys that really struggled are the guys who never played sports or had a grown man, like a coach, for example, getting in their faces, yelling at them. But, that was 4 months. I guess it was 2 months for basic training and then another 10 weeks or 8 weeks for AIT, advanced individual training. And the first 8 weeks are the hardest, but I don't remember being so hard that I just don't remember it being that hard, but that came to mind too. Anyways, the Spartanagogie is what I would say. How about you? Maybe chasing you around Hawaii last year. That was, I'm like, everywhere I look, Sean's like, sing, sing, sing. I'm like, what in the world? Like literally running circles around me. It was awesome.
Mine actually is a little different. Mine's, I have still kind of tendonitis through both of my arms, both of my forearms. And it got really bad at one point where I had to completely stop lifting. And till this day, I still don't really lift in the normal sense of the word, I guess you could say. Most of the exercise that I do is more core type of stuff because of that. But the reason it was physically challenging is because I just had to change the way I did everything. Literally from, even shooting my bow, the way I lifted things, because I don't know if you've ever had it or experienced it, but it's basically, you could literally, if you lift a book or something the wrong way or at the wrong angle, your arm just kind of like collapses or wants to. And the pain is hard to explain. It's excruciating. And so it's really weird. And that was probably the hardest thing. It was 2-3 years of figuring out the process of how to deal with it and compensate and do different things. So yeah, to this day, I don't do a lot of like big lifting, and you've seen me, I'm not like really big or anything, but
jacked.
I can go. It's like when we went hunting and Scott posted something, he's like, thick boy hunting club and Sean.
True.
With a picture of us.
That's true. But that's also why you're getting around so well relative to everybody else. Yeah, so, man. I've never had to deal with anything, no major health or bodily injuries that I've ever had to deal with, knock on wood. So I know I'm really fortunate and blessed that way. My body tends to be pretty resilient, which is good. And I'm just, keep my fingers crossed. So,
yeah, but it's like anything. You hear people that get hurt, they injure their leg, they injure their arm, and you just have to change the way you do everything, stuff you never thought about before. So.
Speaking of learning to shoot your bow, so I don't know if you can see this right here in the dark. That's a new bow. I got the PSE Levitate. That's a left-handed bow. So I'm making the switch this year. Yeah.
So your eye's the dominant eye?
My left eye is dominant. Yeah. So I've shot. The only thing that I ever do left-handed is I shoot pool left-handed. Everything else has all been right-handed. And so I was talking with Dudley about what should I do? Because when I shoot my bow, I can't keep both of my eyes open. I have to close my left eye or I can't pick up a target. And he's like, well, you should probably, the quick fix is to put like a card or something, a blocker on your brim in front of your left eye. So you can keep both eyes open, but it's blocking that field of view. The right thing to do is to switch to shoot left-handed. So I've been talking with a couple of people and decided to make the switch. And then I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I got to buy a new bow because I'm shooting left-handed. Like it gave me a reason to buy a new bow as well. She didn't see through any of that, or she saw right through it, I should say.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be there. My left eye is dominant too, but it's not to the extreme that yours is. So I seem fine, but I think as I get older, I'll probably have to make the switch too.
Yeah, I'll let you know how it goes. All right, man. Next question.
All right. It is from Jared Andrews. He says, how do you balance the unstoppable, in parentheses, cleaner value of blocking out noise and negative feedback of lower performing members on your team, i.e., while being in the zone, while at the same time achieving the goal of bringing them up to your level? This question can apply in sports, business, sales, etc. I'm trying to understand the dichotomy between winning at all costs, yet slowing down to bring the others up with me. And I think he's referring to the book Relentless by Tim Grover.
Yeah. So I think this is a good question. So I'm just trying to paraphrase here. How do you find the balance between wanting to excel and dominate in your life and at the same time turn around and assist and help those individuals who maybe not are at the same level as you, but at least have a desire to or working towards it. That's what I hear. Here's what I would say. Number one is don't have expectations of people. That lowering my expectations of others has actually proven to be a very valuable skill. And I'm not saying that I don't hold people to a high standard, especially and almost exclusively if they've made commitments to me or are working together, right? So Sean, if you say, hey, Ryan, I'll be here at 11 o'clock to do the podcast and you're not, man, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to call you on that. Hey, bro, like no call, no show. You told me we're going to be here. So I would expect you to uphold that. I also know that to be your personality, which is why we're friends and why we work together. But there's other people in life who have made no commitments to me. And who am I to say, well, they should behave this way and they should do that and they should do this. Now, some people hearing that might think that's different because of my job is to tell men how to be better and how to become better. But I'm not offering unsolicited feedback to people either. I'm offering feedback. And if you want it, it's here, it's open, you come and get it. It's not like I would ever reach out to somebody and say, hey, Joe, you don't know me, but I saw this thing that you post on Instagram and I really think you're doing life wrong. Like I'm not, because I have no expectation of Joe. And that has, but other people do. And I have in the past, and not having that expectation takes a big weight off of your shoulders because there's nothing I can do to control anyone, those people in my immediate circle, and especially those outside of my circle. I can influence people, but I can't control them. So first, I would say, let go of the expectation that others have to perform to your level because they don't, and they won't. Some are going to perform better. Some are going to perform worse. And that's just part of life. The other side of it is that somebody helped you along the way. Right? You had a mentor, you had a coach, you had a boss, your wife or a friend, somebody helped you along the way. And I think that's kind of a pay it forward mentality that we can't excel without the help of others. So how can we expect other people to excel without our help? And a big part of the Iron Council, and again, this also applies broadly, is learning and developing the skills that you need to succeed and also mentoring those who want to do the same thing. Iron Council has that built into the programming. Like you're not just there to get, you're there to give. And ironically enough, the more that you give to other people by serving them, the more you're going to get in return. There is a point where your service to others goes unnoticed, or it falls on deaf ears, or it's not appreciated or even taken advantage of. And I think that's a line you need to be aware of, because I can't pour in. I'll just use you as an example, Sean. I can't pour into you. Let's say you hired me as a mentor or some sort of coach, and I'm giving you everything I can. I'm telling you all the things that you need to. I'm helping you uncover answers to your own problems, and you just like habitually just don't implement any of it. At that point, I would wash my hands and say, Sean, I've appreciated our relationship. You're not implementing what I'm sharing with you. You're not improving. You've proven to me that you're less interested in your own development than I am. And I'm done. I'm out. If at some point it changes in the future, you can let me know how it's changed. And if I feel like we can work together in this capacity in the future, sure, but not anymore. So there is a line where your service needs to stop. Anyways, that's that's where I go with it.
Yeah, I would add that, especially thinking of the book, if you're a cleaner, they're never going to be at your level. And so, yeah, the expectation part is right. But then also simultaneously, you have to keep being a cleaner. You have to keep performing. And that example is what's going to lift other people up. So you performing at the highest level is going to make shots. So like he uses obviously the analogy in his book of Michael Jordan. And I look at my business, and I somehow married a woman who's a cleaner as well, right? So it's kind of like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen with the Bulls, where you had 2 cleaners on a team, and then they had Dennis Rodman, right? So there's like 3 cleaners that on any team, those guys would be cleaners, and they happen to be on the same team. And I had that in my business, but they can't expect anyone else on the team to be anywhere near like them. And so it's, instead of that expectation, you have to keep being the first one in the gym. You have to keep making the shots when they count. When it's, you can't keep passing the ball to your coolers on the team, or even the closers, for those game-winning shots, expecting them to make those shots. So you have to keep doing it, but your communication has to improve with those people doing it. So what I mean by that is, like, I don't know if you've seen the Tom Brady thing. I watched it when I got COVID. I was, stuck in bed, and I watched that Man in the Arena. I watched all of them. There's 9 of them. I don't know if you've seen any of them.
I haven't seen him. No.
But it's basically his story of all of the rings that he won, except for the one with Tampa Bay. It's all of his time with the Patriots. And there's a lot of great insight that you could pull from that. What I saw is, you have a guy who no one's ever going to perform at his level. You look at what he's done with his body and everything else, and a lot of people attribute his success to being able to take care of his body, and that's part of it. But what I saw, the most important thing is, he's magnificent at what I call CPC, which is constant personal communication, where if you're the highest achiever in a team, it's your job to be in constant communication with the people on your team, to keep them accountable to the things that need to be getting done for you guys to win championships. And that's what Tom Brady got good at as he got older. When he started, they'd say he got all these rings, right? They got these few rings to start off, and he started thinking, man, this is going to be easy. And then they got a different dynamic, and they went 10 years of not a single ring. And it's frustrating, but during that 10 years, he got better at communicating to his team. And the way he pulled the most out of the people on his team was communicating what he was doing, and constantly that accountability, and not even like calling him and being like, hey, you need to do this, or why aren't you doing this? It's more like, hey guys, I'm going to be in the gym every day at this time. Whoever wants to join me, I'm going to be there. And then you're there. Yeah. This is what I'm doing, getting my results. Hey, I'm using this trainer. You guys could use him if you want, right? Anybody wants to use him, let me know. But this is what I'm doing. And so it's letting people know what you're doing, and then constantly, almost daily. And that's, for me personally, is the most frustrating part of my business, is staying in consistent, constant contact with the people on your team that are never going to be cleaners. But through that process, hopefully they learn to be closers, or they get a little bit more success, or they do just that little bit more that they wouldn't have otherwise done. And that pulls the whole team up. So it's the most frustrating part, but that improvement in your communication, and then just being cognizant of how you communicate when you're in the zone, because he asked that in the question too, about being in the zone. And my wife and I, both being cleaners early in our business, we're always focused, always working, always on our way to the next thing. And our team looked at that as being cold, or not caring, or being mad at them, even worse, where we weren't any of those things. We were just focused on the next task. But we had to realize that, and when that happened, stop ourselves and communicate what was going on, so that we got less and less of that feeling from them, right? So I think communication is the key in that.
It's interesting that you said how people interpreted it as cold, or that you don't care about them, or that you're mad at them, because I get the same thing, and I do it to my family a lot, and they interpret it as something that it's not. I'm just like, no, I'm not mad at all. I'm focused on this thing. And I think a lot of the times guys who perform at the levels that we try to end up leaving a bit of a wake of collateral damage without realizing what's going on behind you, because you're so focused on what's in front of you, which is good. But I like that concept, that framework of constant personal communication, CPC, so that you're stopping and looking and making sure that everybody around you is still good. They're still on board. They're still with you. You
didn't blow them completely out.
Right. Or it's like, you're running a team event, and you're like, you just get out front and you just run, and before you know it, like, it gets pretty quiet, and you look around and nobody else is around you. You're like, oh shit, this isn't an individual event. This is a team event. And I just burned everybody out because I could run fast. Well, that's not the objective. The objective wasn't to go at it alone. The objective is to do that as a team. And so you can be a cleaner and lead your team effectively, but you can't blow them out of the water if that's the team.
Yeah. And I feel like in the book, he has this whole page. It's page 28 and 29. It says like what a cooler, closer, and cleaner does. And there's one thing in here. It says coolers think they want the spotlight, but when they get it, they usually handle it badly. Closers stand in front because they need to show who's in charge, and cleaners don't have to show who's in charge. Everybody already knows. And so, I thought in a sense of if you're just doing your thing, like when you started the Iron Council, when you started Order of Man, I wasn't around, but you have guys that you talked about this in our call this week about the guys who were originally there. You had Gatch and Reese and some of those guys, right? Well, they knew that you were doing something special because they could feel it. It wasn't as much what you said, what how you tried to portray yourself, you trying to be in front. They just saw what you were doing, and they knew if they grabbed onto your coattails, and they might not have realized this is what was happening, but they just knew something that if they grabbed onto your coattails, you were going to take them somewhere, right? This was something special. And now in that process, like you don't have to call Gatch and be on, I'm assuming, all the time, like, hey, are you doing this? Are you running this?
Of course
are you
not.
communicating this? Right? You don't have to do that with Reese. You don't have to do that with any of the leaders who has stepped up to your level. And now you have those cleaners on your team, but it was from you just doing you in the beginning. And then those guys pulled themselves up to that level following suit.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that's the case. Cool. What's next?
Justin Gelsma. He asks, on the Man in the Making podcast, you mentioned your phone is always on silent mode. How does that work? Do you check it periodically and return messages as needed? Curious about your phone management.
Yeah, I don't have, so I turn off all notifications. I don't get any notifications. I don't get text notifications, phone calls, updates on different apps and social media outlets. I get nothing. Because if I do, in fact, I have our system that we use for the Iron Council pulled up on my browser right now because I have the questions loaded, and I can hear it beeping every once in a while when somebody sends a new message or responds to something. So it's beeping at me, and even that is just distracting. So I can't imagine what it would be like to have all of your notifications, ding, 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 it would be nonstop. So what I usually do is I block in the buffers is what I call it. So I have buffers between schedules. So you and me will be wrapped up here around noon, but we got started a little late. So it'll probably go to like 12:10, 12:15, somewhere right in there. Well, that's okay because my next appointment is at 12:30. I didn't make my next appointment at noon. I made it at 12:30 because I know things go late. Little fires need to be put out, and those buffers, I'm blocking the things that need to get done. So for example, in that gap, I don't need to prepare for my next meeting because that's not a meeting I need to prepare for. It's a phone call. So I can use that time to just send out a few texts, respond to a couple of messages, and maybe get to some of my DMs on Instagram, and I block in that buffer. So I'm just working in that buffer. And that's it. Like it's really simple, but I'm so much more effective in 30 minutes with my time management on the phone than I could be in 3 hours because it's only hyper-focused time where I'm doing that particular activity. And then the other times I'm hyper-focused on this. Like I'm not checking messages. I'm all in on this. The only other thing that I'm doing that people may not know is I'm taking notes. Like I like to take notes as we talk. I wrote down here CPC. That was a framework you just shared because I like that. That's cool. I want to remember that. But outside of that, like I'm fully present and engaged in this conversation by speaking and listening, and that's it. So that's how I do it.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I just turn off all notifications, and actually I shouldn't say that. Not all, but all the ones available to us. Every app you load on your phone or everything you put on there, they all ask you if you want push notifications. So I have
Right.
no on
No,
all of
the
it.
answer is
It's
no.
automatically no. But for things that are more important, or if there's relationships I want to develop, I mean, if I'm being totally honest, on Instagram, I'll push notifications from certain people, meaning that if they post something or they put something on their story or they do something, I'll get it and then I can respond. So it helps me stay in communication with those people. And so things like that I'll do.
Do
But
you still do
outside of
that?
that,
Do you still do that in just as it comes up, or do you do that at a certain period of time? So let's say, for example, because I'm sure you get notifications from me and you're following me and you want to make that relationship work. That's a joke. I don't really know if you are doing that or not. And I don't expect you to, but let's just hypothetically say that you are. Are you just like, if I were to send something out, are you going to immediately respond to that? Or do you have certain times of the day where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, Ryan shared something cool. And Steve and John and Bill, okay, I'll just go respond to those 5 people right now, all at once.
that it's both. So if I'm in the middle of some, like I could be doing a task that I can multitask with.
Sure.
And if that's the case and I get that notification, I'll click on it and be like, oh, wow, check that out. This happened um, when we went hunting. This is a good example of that. I was in my garage. I was doing just kind of like, I don't want to say meaningless, but brainless tasks in the garage. And a thing came up that said you were going live. And I'd been listening to a podcast or something when it popped up. So I just clicked on it and it goes to a live thing with you. And you happen to be talking about how, people don't deliver on their promises or something like that, right? And you were in a little rant, but then you're like, I have this hunt coming up and I've reached out to people and it's amazing how many guys are like, well, I don't know. And when, and all the stuff. And you were like, I'm just looking for a yes or no. You think you want to go? I'll send you the information. If not, tell me you're not interested. Right.
And that's fine too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's fine too. And you're like, I can't find guys that are willing to commit or whatever. And so I just sent you a text saying, hey, when's the hunt? That was it during the thing. And while you were in that live, you're like, look, like my buddy Sean just texted me this, like, when's the hunt? Obviously he's on, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, if you're interested, you let me know. If not, you say no, but no humming and hawing in between, right? So that push notification is what got me on that hunt with you guys. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
you were on those pushes before because I wanted to build that relationship, and you still are because it's just I never took it off, right? But
You're just waiting for the next hunt. You're just waiting to get invited on the next hunt. You don't care about anything else.
That's all it is.
Just as long as you can get me on a hunt.
And obviously that wasn't the intention. I just wanted to be
of course.
more in tune with what you're talking about, because what you're trying to do with Order of Man is important to me, in helping get that message out there. So the more things I could be in tune with that you're putting out there, if I could share those and whatever, that was my intention, is that I can keep sharing that stuff and putting it out there as it came up. But that just happened to happen because, I had that notification.
So one of the things I'm hearing you say is you might have exceptions to the notification rule, but here's the distinction I'm hearing between what I think most people do is you're very intentional about it. It's not like leave all notifications up for whatever. No, it's like, I'm okay with getting notifications from these few people that I want to stay connected with. So it's, even though you might have those, we'll just call them interruptions, they're still intentional interruptions where you're like, oh no, I would interrupt what I'm doing at least to take a look at what this person's doing or saying or sharing or emailing me about. That's what I hear you say.
If I was in a meeting, if I was doing something for my business specifically, if I was with a client, if I was with one of my kids and we're, doing scripture time or having a talk at night or something, I'm not going to, in mid talk, I see, oh, Ryan's going live, and then click on that.
Right. Of course.
It's not going to supersede. It doesn't automatically take the place of kind of, if you took the Covey, what's important, the most important, go down from there. It's not going to go immediately to the top of the list, but if I'm doing something of lower importance, then I can check it. Otherwise, it's like you said, I only check emails and those things early in the morning before anyone's up in my house. Like I get up usually 5:30 before anyone's up. I'm doing emails, all the monotonous tasks that aren't going to be getting me growth results throughout my day. And then I do it the same thing late at night. So the whole middle of the day, if I can be making phone calls and things that grow my business, that, serve me for growth, I do those. And anything monotonous that could be done in off times, that's when I do those things.
There's one other thing I've been thinking about too, as we've discussed this a little bit, is that I think these little devices that we have conditioned us to believe that just because someone reaches out, that we owe them an immediate response. So if somebody texts you, you got to text them right back. If somebody sends a message on Instagram, you got to message them right back. I've even seen like phone call. Oh, they're calling. I got to call them, because you always have this device. I've even seen people, my family does this, and my wife always laughs at me. She's like, hey, so-and-so came by. Did you get the door? I'm like, no. And she's like, well, you were home. You didn't get the door. I'm like, yeah, I was working. She's like, oh, you're on a podcast? I said, no, maybe I was sending emails or working on the book. She's like, and you didn't stop to get the door? No, I don't. It's not my responsibility to acquiesce to your request of my time and attention and energy. Like I don't owe you to answer the door. I don't owe you to pick up the phone call. I don't owe you a message within the first 10 seconds of receiving it. I will do it on my time, unless, of course, there's exceptions. If it's an emergency of course, right. But that's not what I'm saying. I've just gotten completely okay with managing my schedule on my time. And if you want some of my time, I'll make that time 100% for those people I care about. I will make that time, but it's going to be on my time. Like I had a buddy reach out. He's going on Jocko's podcast, and he's like, hey, can I have a call with you about like preparing for it and getting ready? I'm like, yeah, sure. Here's the time I'm available. And if it can work, it works. And if it doesn't, well, that's on him. That's his problem. I'll make myself available, but it's within my constraints.
Yeah. Well, just think of the simple thing as somebody dropping something off at your house. The goal was to drop something at your house. But if you go open the door now and they're there, that could take up 15, 20 minutes of just talking about nothing, because they want to catch up, or,
right.
Who knows, maybe they're hoping you're going to answer the door so they can tell you about some problem they're having, right? That distracts.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. My wife teases me about that too, because as soon as that happens, she says, I can literally see your eyes glaze over as soon as people start talking about whatever they're dealing with. Like, yeah, well, that's about how I feel. So, all right, what's next?
Right. Brett Huber asked, he said it's a little lengthy. He posted it on the fatherhood page. So here we go. The basics are that my 11-year-old daughter confided in me and broke down that she feels like her mom, my wife, doesn't love her, reacts negatively to her, and my daughter doesn't trust her enough to talk to her about it, or basically anything, because of those reactions. I was heartbroken hearing all of this come out. I believe my wife will be too. My wife deals with some pretty serious depression, takes medication, and I believe does her best with it, but the ups and downs are still a very real part of our life. She has a really good relationship with our older daughter, and I didn't expect this from my youngest. My wife and oldest daughter were out of town at a volleyball tournament. They've been traveling, and my wife was pissy. Not the right time for this right as she walked in the door, but I feel like I need to start this emotional conversation between them soon for two reasons. One, I want my daughter to have the confidence and courage to confront anyone in her life who's causing her pain, to explain her feelings and grow from the experience. She needs to learn that she's the one who decides how much the actions of others affect her. And two, there's no way this is intended by my wife, but clearly there's a disconnect and she isn't aware of the impact. I can't be the go-between, but I feel like I can initiate the tough conversation and hopefully ensure it stays calm and productive. Any thoughts or advice from any of you is appreciated.
Well, I think you alluded to the answer right at the end there. Number one, you owe it to your wife to talk with her. Like, and you are, I'm not saying you aren't, but guys, be very careful of having conversations with your children and then excluding your spouse from those conversations. That's not right. Like the classic example is little Timmy or little Sally gets in trouble with mom or dad, and then asks mom or dad not to tell the other one. No, sorry, we're a partnership. You know, if my son does something and my wife knows about it, she's telling me. Like, that's not even a question, because we've discussed that, and it's important that both of us know, because we both look at those scenarios through a different lens, which is why we're married and have kids together, to complement each other and to play off of each other. So yeah, don't hold it. And you already said too, she likely doesn't know, but also your daughter needs to learn a valuable lesson in that if there's something that's on her mind and something that's bothering her, she can't hole up and she can't shell up. She needs to have difficult conversations with people, because I don't want to guarantee, but I'd be willing to bet that when your wife finds out, she's probably going to be upset about it. Sure. But she's also probably going to change her behavior based on the limited information that we have here. And it's going to get better, at least for a time. So this is a powerful moment for your daughter to learn how to have a healthy conversation that's uncomfortable, and to show some courage around that. So what I would suggest is talking with your wife about what's going on and the way that you've interpreted your daughter's feedback. Talk with your daughter about why it's important that you share with mom. And you might even be able to have that conversation with all three of them together. It sounds like you may have another daughter, is the way I kind of read that. I don't think this is your only daughter.
Yeah, he has an older and this is his younger.
Okay. Cause I was going to say, if it was just your only daughter, you could, around the dinner table, you could have some really powerful conversations, but with the older daughter there, that might not be appropriate. But maybe there's an opportunity for you guys to go out or to carve out some time in the morning or while you're doing something, and you can at least broach the subject where you're there. So your daughter feels more comfortable because you're there, and your wife might be able to see it differently because she can't see it now. But also you have to excuse yourself from it at some point, right? Like, you can't always be in the middle. But I think there's an opportunity for you to be in the middle in this environment, at least initially, and then go ahead and bow out now that they're having the conversation and they're discussing what needs to be discussed. But yeah, you said it yourself. Your wife doesn't likely know, but she needs to know, and you need to be the one to bring it to her. But your daughter also needs to learn how to have a tough conversation, and you can foster and facilitate that as well.
Yeah, that was perfect. The only thing I would add is make sure that in your conversation with your daughter, that you explain to her maybe why your wife communicates that way with her, and make sure that you have your wife's back, because the last thing you want to happen when you go to your daughter or your wife with your daughter, that she feels like she's being ganged up on. So if you have that conversation with your daughter and you're like, I know, honey, I know she does that, I'm sorry, that's the wrong way to do it. The right way to do it is, you know what, honey, I know she does that, but here's why. It's because she cares about you, and maybe she doesn't communicate it the way that you like, but here's her intention. So, most parents they mess this one up because they don't communicate well enough with each other. And maybe they're even mad at the way they communicate with each other. And then when one of their kids start complaining about one of those things, they take their side. Yeah. Don't ever take your kid's side. You and your wife are the partnership. You're the most important in that relationship and that dynamic. So make sure, even if you agree with your daughter, that you still have your wife's back, and you communicate that to your daughter before you set it up between the three of you or the two of them.
I think that advice could even work in a strained relationship between exes. Like, let's say you have an ex and she's a bit maybe vindictive or says things about you, and then your daughter or son says, well, mom is saying all these things about you. Well, it might be easy for you, and you might have a desire to really go after her. But what if instead say, hey, we've had a hard relationship and there's been some strains that both of us have an element of responsibility for. But the thing that you need to know is that your mom does love you and she wants to make sure that the environment around you is the best. Like, you don't have to lie or make stuff up or blow smoke up your kids, but like that might be a healthy way to approach these conversations, that are happening. But I do like that advice of not taking the other side. I had an experience just a week or so ago where somebody had said something about something I said in a negative context to other people. And instead of just being upset about it, I reached out to that person. I said, hey man, like, why did you say this? Like, if you had a problem, all you had to do was come to me. And we had a really healthy discussion about it because I was willing to have that conversation. And my whole goal was that we both walk away knowing that we're not supposed to throw each other under the bus. Like, we're supposed to lift each other up and prop each other up. Things can be addressed, but issues need to be addressed between us, not everybody else. So you need to be willing to have those conversations. It's very powerful. And what was good about it too is immediately a weight was lifted off of my shoulders, and the individual was able to share some things that he needed to share. And it was great because I was willing to have that conversation head on.
Yeah.
All right, man.
I like it.
What's next?
Next is John Freeze. He asks, how do you strike a balance between really pushing yourself and setting goals that are unattainable and getting discouraged for failing?
Failure is an interesting one, especially in the self-help space, because we despise it. We're so repulsed by it that we can't even barely utter the word "I failed." It's really wild to me. Like, we'll make up the acronyms, right? The first attempt in learning, and fail forward, and fail fast, and fail out. Like, and it's like we try to craft everything that we possibly can to avoid just saying, no, I failed on that. And I don't know if it's something I learned or something I've always had. Like, I don't actually have a problem with failure. Maybe I've failed enough where I'm like, yeah, okay, it's not the end of the world. That's probably what it is. But I don't have a problem saying I failed. Like, I'll even post some things that, I failed on, and people are like, well, you didn't fail, you learned. I'm like, well, no, I failed and I learned, but I did not fail. I failed to meet my objective, and therefore I failed. So I think we have to have a healthy dose of reality that we are going to fail. Like, you're going to fail 100%. You're going to fail. And if you aren't willing to admit that, then you aren't going to do anything that stretches you outside your comfort zone, because you can't stand it. You can't deal with it. Right. But if you said, no, I know I'm going to fail. Like, I'm going to start this podcast and maybe it's going to work and maybe it isn't. And, people are going to ignore me, or I'm going to get, mocked, or other people are going to decline to come on and do a podcast. And if you're really, really honest with yourself about that, it's almost like giving your enemy a face and a name. And now, because you know what it looks like, you can actually deal with it in a healthy way. But if you're always trying to hide from, I don't want to look like a loser, I don't want people to think less of me, I don't want to fail, man, you're going to run away every time when something gets just a little bit hard. So I know that doesn't answer your question directly, but I think it's really, really important that we address this healthy relationship with failure. And then what most people have is a very unhealthy, destructive relationship with it. And I think if you get healthy about it, you're going to push harder than you did before you realize that, you were afraid of failing.
Yeah, and I think this is where sports is valuable, especially if you grew up playing, because I know you grew up playing baseball. And
yeah, baseball and football, yeah.
To me, baseball was so valuable, so much more valuable than any other sports, mainly because of the percentages for doing well are much lower in baseball. You look at baseball compared to basketball, right? Like, for you to be in the Hall of Fame in basketball, you need a 90+ percentage shooting percentage, which means your failure percentage is super low for you to be considered one of the greats. But in baseball, you're failing 70% of the time and you still make it into the Hall of Fame.
And you're still amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Good
that
point.
was valuable, I think, to me as a kid, where you learn to fail and keep your head up and run back to the dugout and be ready for the next at bat. Right. And so,
That's all you
those
can
sorts
do.
of things, I've always kind of attributed my view on that back to that experience growing up in that sort of a sport. And the challenge
Think about
is not enough people have that.
wrestling.
Yeah.
Like that's like, I'm not going to say it's even worse, but because your percentages shouldn't be, 300 and you're considered awesome. But man, you go out there and you're in this tiny singlet. I mean, you might as well be, you're damn near naked, really.
Yeah.
And you go out there with one other person, and that person is trying to physically dominate you, and they do. And think about how hard that is. I mean, we've had UFC fighters on the podcast, and think about what that's like getting your ass kicked in front of hundreds of thousands of people that, are critiquing you and telling you all the things you should and shouldn't have done. And you're in an octagon with one other man who's trying to exert himself upon you. Like talk about failure. But
especially
the more those guys fail, they can have that.
Too.
Well, but then also they take their pride on being physically dominant, and then they're dominated. Man, I can't imagine what that would be like, but that probably gives you a healthy sense of humility to drive on and get back in the ring and do it again.
Yeah. I had one other thought on that question, and that I saw this when I first got into Iron Council on the first battle team I was on, where I was getting a lot of 100% in my quadrants every week, and was asked, like, are you making it too easy? And, I'm like, no, I know my threshold, and I know what I can achieve, and I also know what pushes myself. So it's not like I wasn't pushing myself the whole time, but I was getting it done, where if I doubled the number and I'm getting 50%, that doesn't serve me. And so I need those little wins. Everybody needs those little wins. I see it when people come in, the business that I'm in. You get someone that is making $50,000 a year, and you help them put a business plan together, and they say, they're going to be making $1 million their first year or their first couple of years, and have guys done that? Yeah. Should that be your expectation? No, most likely you're going to fail in that. Why don't you start with $100,000? That's twice as much as you've ever made in your life. Let's start there, right? Yeah. And on track to $1 million. And the likelihood that that's going to happen is a lot better. Now, if you go out and you make 2 or 250, you've far exceeded that, and you're never going to be more excited. But if your expectation was $1 million and it was too high and you hit 200, you're going to feel like a failure still, and you might, feel sad. It might get you to quit. So you need to have these little wins along the way that are attainable, till it becomes a habit that you're constantly pushing yourself to do a little bit more. It's like the story that the English bike riding team, right? Cycling team that was like the worst in the world. And then their coach came in and focused on the 1% better every day. 1% better. 1% doesn't seem like it's moving the needle, but 1% improvement with compounded over time turns you into the best in the world. And that's what happened with that cycling team. It's the same with us. We need to, it is a dichotomy, but you're better off ratcheting down the big goals, and then achieving all of the smaller ones en route to the larger ones.
Sure. Well, I also think you need to have people around you who can give you a realistic expectation of what it's going to take.
Yes.
Because this goes back to your story of business coaching. If you've made 50 grand your whole life and you're like, okay, I want to make 5 million this year. Like a business coach is going to say, okay, cool. Hold your horses a little bit, slow it down. Let's get these fundamentals in place. And I'm going to help you get from 50 to 100, but we're not getting to 5 million today. Might take us 10 years to get to that point. So these people around you, what's that?
I was going to say, or show you the real numbers that it's going to take
Exactly.
to do that. You could
Or
do
how
that, but
long it
here's
will
what you're going
take.
to have to do,
Right.
right? And if
Yeah.
you don't think you can do that, what do you think you can do? Okay, and if you
Right.
think you can do this, here's where you're going to land.
Then the other thing I would say is making sure that your goals and objectives on the other side of things are just real. They're relevant. They're realistic. Um, if I said, for example, that I'm going to be an astronaut this year, like that's number one, that's not realistic because there's people who are way more qualified than I am. And number two, it's not even relevant. Like, I mean, that would be cool, but I don't care enough about it to pursue that. So like, why am I making that goal? But we do that a lot. Actually, I used to do that because there's a bunch of people I follow on social media and I started picking up, their hobbies and their activities and doing what they're doing because I thought they were cool or I thought they were, the epitome of what I was supposed to be. And then I realized, oh, I'm not actually doing this for me. Like I'm doing this to be validated by them or validated by somebody else, but I don't even care about this thing. And so I let it go and started pursuing the things that were relevant to me. And life's a whole lot better when you're doing it that way.
And then you have to also find a system that works for you to implement those things.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I like the battle plan that you put together, because it focuses you daily on the task necessary to achieve what you need to in each of your quadrants. And so you're focused on the now and not, whether it's the failing aspect or whatever else, it's what you can control today in this moment.
And it's also quarterly objectives. So really, how much are you going to change the world in the next 90 days? Probably not the world, but you could definitely change your family dynamic.
Yeah.
You can definitely work on changing the culture in your business. You could definitely empower and embolden the people in your neighborhood to live better lives. So you can do a lot in 90 days, but you aren't going to change the world in 90 days. Now you stack enough of those together. Yeah, you're going to start making some major impacts.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, one of the first things I did with the first battle plan when I started the IC was my 90 days for my family dynamic is I wanted to stop yelling at my kids. And so out of 90 days, I was not quite, but holy smokes, going from yelling at them almost every day to not, that moved the needle significantly in our entire family dynamic.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. What's next?
Corey Donnell asks, you mentioned a couple weeks ago your wife was traveling and you were handling the kids in the house. What were some action steps you took while your wife was gone to ensure you still had everything done? Battle plan, he has in parentheses, while doing double duty. Appreciate all the value that AMAs have to offer. Keep it up.
So one of the first things I do, because my wife will leave occasionally, she'll go out of town for a couple of days or whatever and spend some time with friends or family. And so I'm here with the kiddos and I've also got work. So, I mean, these aren't just spur of the moment trips. Like I know about these trips for, 4, 6, 8 weeks ahead of time. And so what I'll do leading up to my wife leaving is I'll go double time the week before. So I record at this point a podcast it's 3 to 4 a week. Last week, I actually did 13 podcasts last week, 3 of my own, and then another 10 for other shows that asked me to go on. So, it's a busy podcasting schedule among other things. And so what I'll do is know, okay, well, my wife's leaving from Wednesday through Sunday. So that I want to be present. I need to do the homeschooling stuff. I need to make them lunch. Like there's things I need to do with the kids. So I'm not going to be able to do my work Wednesday through Friday. Okay, well, it still has to get done. So I make it up ahead of time. So I'll record, instead of recording 3 podcasts of my own the week before, I'll record 6 that week and I'll go hard on getting everything lined up so that when those 3 or 4 or 5 days come up, I can be fully present and take on the load of the weight that she carries within the home. And that alone, that's how you do it. That's how you be focused. And that's how you can be present with what's important right in front of you, but not shirk your duties and responsibilities. Now, as far as my tactics, those things change a little bit, right? Like going to jujitsu with my 4 kids on, Wednesday night, if Trish is gone, could work. It wouldn't be enjoyable. and it probably wouldn't be all that productive, and everybody else would be pissed off at me probably. So that might not work. But could I do a workout, an hour-long workout with my kids in the driveway, or doing, a circuit in the house? 100% I could do that. And that would still meet my objective, or excuse me, my tactic of getting my exercise in, right? So you might need to tweak your tactics a little bit. Not that you get to shirk them, not that you get to do that indefinitely, but just adjust or adapt as you have these life circumstances come up. Or she's going to be gone. So if you really feel like I need to get to jiu-jitsu on Wednesday night, okay, get a sitter. Like, you can do that. Like, what's keeping you from planning ahead and calling the sitter instead of your wife having to do it? Right. So there's things and ways you can do it. You just need a little pre-planning, and you need to bust your tail the week before so that you're ready for the week of.
Yeah, that's spot on. And what I heard in that is communication that we already talked about before. You guys communicate enough that you're on the same page. You also, I'm sure, knew what the kids had that week, every single one of the kids, what they had, what the times, where they were. Put that in as your non-negotiables, and then you can work the rest around that. I'm assuming, right? You kind of alluded to that, but I just wanted to, maybe clarify on that part, right?
Yeah. One specific thing that my wife does that's very helpful is, so this last trip, she was gone for, I think it was 4 days. Yeah, it was 4 days. And she had an 8x11 sheet of paper for each day. So like Thursday, it was chore list, and it showed me who had what. And then lunch, our second was going to make lunch on Thursday. And then dinner, here's the food, here's what it is. Our oldest is going to make dinner. And then Friday, here's the 3 or 4 chores. Here's the food list. So like, she plans it out really well too. And she also, with homeschooling, she puts together we call them packets. It's basically their assignments for the day. She'll put them together in daily packets. So she's like, here's your daughter's Thursday packet. And so we can just go through that. She organizes a lot of that, which obviously takes a lot of the workload off as well.
Yeah. So I'm glad I asked that, because basically what you just said is she does the same thing you do. She loads up the week before for that week while she's gone too. And the combination of the both is what works.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Let's take a couple more, man.
All right. Josh Guerrero asks, in a world that seems to be plunging into chaos and becoming more unpredictable, what are the key things that we as men should be doing in order to prepare, as things are likely to keep getting worse?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like I've gone over these a lot, but like I would reiterate a couple of things. Number one, get your financial house in order. Obviously, that's a big area of the life that you deal with, right? So even as COVID started to take place a couple of years ago, like, I pulled out quite a bit of money out of the bank, because at the time when it was crazy and nobody knew what in the world was going on, I'm like, what is happening? So I pulled a bunch of money out of the bank, and I keep that on hand, so that was one little change that I made. Our investment portfolio stayed pretty much the same, but we have rental properties. So every time I hear on the news about inflation and home values are going up, I'm like, good, keep going. I like that, because my rentals rates go up. The value of our property goes up. I have no problem with that, because our financial house is in order. Mm-hmm. That's where most people get it wrong, is their financial house isn't in order. And maybe they had a bankruptcy 2 years ago. And so now they're renting, and they're negatively impacted by the fact that rates are going up. Whereas I'm positively impacted by it, because I made good financial decisions 5, 6, 10 years ago. And we've been continuing to make those decisions. There's other investment opportunities that have come up because our financial house is in order. And as these opportunities present themselves, we're in the position to take advantage of them. So definitely having your financial house in order. I would also make sure that you're developing marketable skills. So learning how to communicate, learning how to network. Maybe there's a specific craft that you need to develop or learn based on what your market is or what you do for work. but learning those marketable skills is important. Building your network is hugely important. Like if I stopped Order of Man today, or for some reason the plug got pulled and I couldn't do it anymore, I mean, I'd have a new gig lined up this afternoon. And I'm not trying to be arrogant about that, but that's the reality, because I've spent, 7 years at this point building a powerful network with powerful people. And then the other front, I would say, is your provisions. So that's your food storage. We just bought about $1,000 or so worth of food storage from, I believe it's called Patriot Supply or My Patriot Supply. So my wife and I worked on that a little bit. Water filtration systems, fuel. We've got a generator in place in case the power of the grid goes down. We're looking at solar as another viable option. And then firearms, ammunition. I mean, we all know what it is. The challenge is it gets overwhelming because there's so much. And so one thing that we've done with food provisions is that every time my wife goes grocery shopping, which is usually about once a week or so, she'll always get a little more food, like an extra couple bags of rice, or an extra case of water, or some canned items. I just bought her a freeze dryer. So every day she's freeze drying and vacuum sealing new stuff. And so we're not doing it all at once. It's like the financial thing. I didn't just make the decision to be financially abundant and then the next day I was. Like, I've been doing it for 10 years, well, 15 years at this point. And that's what it takes, doing it every single day, little bit at a time. Like is it called like the Kaizen method, the 1% better every single day? Or the Kaizen, or I think that's what it's called.
Something like that. Yeah.
That's what it is. So do it now. If you don't do it now, in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to find yourself in a bad situation, asking the same question to a bunch of strangers on a podcast. Like, do it now, 1% better every single day. And before you know it, you find yourself in a much better scenario than you were a year or two ago.
Yeah. It's, as you said, that was spot on. The only thing I would add is to have him read Sovereignty again. And as he's going through that, highlight what he thinks are the biggest holes in his boat, and then fill those holes, whatever it is, and start there, most important to least important, just work your way down that list.
Well, that's an interesting analogy. So imagine you're in this boat that you're talking about, and you've got like 5 different leaks that you've identified. Which one would you fill the first? Like the largest one, like the one that's taking on the most water, that's the one that you would address first. Yeah. And once that was addressed, then you'd move to the one that was less risky, but more risk than the others. And it's the same thing with the scenario we're talking about here. If you have no water, like you have plenty of food, but no water, okay, well, water might be something you'd look into. If you have no fuel on hand, but you have some other things that are pretty squared away, maybe it's time to worry about the fuel. So look at the risk that you're taking by not covering those scenarios, and fill the greatest risk first.
Yeah, there's, if you're talking financially, I use this analogy a lot with the boat, but most people's solution to their financial problems is make more money. And so they never work on their bad habits with money. So, getting better at getting out of debts, putting money aside for emergencies, putting money aside for long term. They never build up any of those habits that are necessary to be wealthy. They just try to make more money and then wonder why they never become wealthy. And it's like you having those holes in your boat, and all you're doing is trying to row faster. You're still going to sink,
right?
No matter how fast you row. So you got to fill those holes.
Yeah, definitely. All right, man, let's take one more.
All right. AJ Hunter. He says, in both of your experiences as hunters, what would you say is the best bang for your buck, non-resident, over-the-counter hunting trip if stocking the freezer is a main goal? Colorado elk and Hawaii axis deer are of my top interest.
Okay, so biggest bang for your buck. I think the elk hunt, depending on where you go and if you go with somebody, he's got a background in wilderness survival and outdoors, so he understands all this stuff. That might be a good avenue, especially because it's a large animal. So if you shoot a large animal, you're going to fill up that freezer a lot quicker. That's a lot more effective than going and shooting, 7 axis deer. Plus, they're much harder to kill. You and I know that, right? Those are much harder to kill. So if it's biggest bang for your buck and you want to fill up the freezer, going like flying to Hawaii and trying to shoot axis deer to fill up your freezer. First, you're going to have to shoot a lot of them. Second, they're very hard to shoot. Third, you need to bring that food back. And so that's more cost and more inefficiency. Like, I don't know where this idea comes from. Like hunting is cheaper than going to the grocery store. Like I haven't found that to be the experience. Maybe a pig hunt is probably a high success rate. Like go to Texas and shoot some pigs. That's a high success rate, I'm sure. Or, you go to some well-managed land and you get on some big whitetails or big mule deer. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would also say, I think we're thinking more from a bow hunter's perspective. And so
yeah, true.
If you're looking most bang for your buck, I mean, first of all, start with the rifle. If you're shooting with the bow.
Good point.
That's because you could go to Hawaii and you could shoot 10 in a half an hour. That is with true. The rifle. If you're at the right property that allows you rifle hunting and gives you, a super high limit or no limit. You can get on some ranches if you know someone or somebody introduces you to somebody, they'll let you shoot as many as you want. And you could go in a day and literally shoot 20 deer. So, if you've got a rifle with the bow, not so much.
Holy cow.
And so, yeah, you could do that. But then you also, in Hawaii, you have to know someone. Or you could go on to a place like we went to, but they'll have, their limits are super high also, and pay that. But, the most bang for your buck is start asking people, who live in Hawaii or around Hawaii or have hunted a lot, who they know, maybe you get introductions there. That's what I would say is a big difference.
It's a huge difference. Because I remember sitting there thinking, I wish I had a rifle right now. But yeah,
we would have shot 1,000 if we could in those.
And I don't know. I don't diminish anybody who rifle hunts at all. Like it's still hard. Like you're still out there working your tail off, and you still have to make the shot cleanly. Like things still need to go right, and you still need to put effort together. But it takes a lot of variables out of the equation. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, one more.
All right.
Because that was a hunting question. So
yeah,
those are free. We do those all the time. Those in jiu-jitsu, those don't even count. They're just free questions.
Ralph Rojas asks, what practical tactics or general rules do you follow to keep fear at bay? Creeping thoughts of bad things that can happen in your life. I've struggled with the challenge that anytime I work towards a meaningful goal, the worry level rises.
I can't relate with this question. And I'm not trying to be dismissive of it, but I have fear. I don't have fear about chasing my goals. It's hard. I can't even answer the question. Why are you afraid?
You say,
let me say it this way and say what you're going to say, but let me say it this way. So what's the alternative? Do nothing? I'm not okay with that. Like, I'm not okay with that at all. So anything that I might be worried about or concerned with or afraid of is pale in comparison to me sitting on my ass and not chasing the things that I want to chase. So I don't deal with it. And I don't think I ever have. When I started Order of Man, I wasn't afraid of like chasing it or what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't? Well, I wanted to know. I wanted to find out. And the fact that it could have gone another way was a very real possibility and one that I contemplated. It didn't keep me from pursuing it. So that's how I would choose to look at it, is instead of thinking about what if things go wrong, what if you stay where you are? Like, you should be afraid of that. That to me is a greater fear than if things go sideways with the ventures that you're interested in.
Terrifying. Yeah. But would you say that you would call yourself an eternal optimist? Do you think you have that? Like, if we're given talents, if we're given gifts from God, would you say that's one of your gifts? Is that you look at everything with optimism? Like everything's going to be okay. You're going to end up in a good place. No. Okay.
I mean, maybe but I don't look at it as being optimistic. I look at it as actually being pretty realistic based on my track record.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of optimism, I know what you're saying. I wouldn't frame it like that. I'm, I just know I'm confident. That's what it is. I'm confident. So it's not about optimism. It's about confidence. Like I can make this work if I want. Of course, I know I can because I have so many other things that have worked out. And also I know that if it doesn't work out, then I'll deal with that. If order of man doesn't work out, if my financial planning practice back then didn't work out, okay, well, then I deal with it and pivot, adjust, learn a new skill, tweak it, massage it a little bit, make it better, and then it gets better. But the fear has never been, and maybe that is a personality thing, which is, I think, something you're alluding to. Maybe that's just a personality thing, but I'm just not going to sit around and do nothing because I'm afraid of what could happen. I'm more afraid of doing nothing and what life would look like if I was just kind of mediocre or complacent with where I was in life.
Yeah, I know for me, my affirmations I've had for over 20 years, I remind myself daily, I'm not going to get to the end of my life and say, I wish I would have ...
Hmm.
That's my biggest fear, is that getting to a place where I look back and say, man, I wish I would have tried this, done this, pushed a little harder in this, or whatever it is. And so that's a major, but then I think it's also looking for practical tactics, is knowing what you want. I think a lot of people get scared because they don't really know what they want. And so they drift, and you could get sidetracked by fear or worry instead of being focused on the tactics and tasks you need to accomplish to get what you want. So I don't know. And I do think it's a personality thing. I think some people just innately worry a lot more. Like my wife's a worrier and I'm not.
Yeah.
But that it could be a personality thing too. But I think that focusing on what you can control and what serves you now and on a daily basis is a practical tactic, I think, to overcome the fear part.
So here's one other thought, because you were talking about drifting, and as you were saying it, I'm like, I don't, I don't think that's totally right. I actually don't mind drifting. I mean, I have a direction I want to go for sure, but I'm okay with just kind of exploring and taking little side paths and alternatives and just experimenting with them and seeing what works. But I think that comes from where I derive my sense of pride in the way that I show up. So this might be a pivot you could make, is a lot of people, their sense of pride or self-worth is derived from reaching their goal and their destination and their accomplishments. And that's fine. I take pride in the things that we've done, but I'm more proud of the daily actions. I'm more proud of doing something, anything, trying new things, experimenting with new things. Somebody asked me not too long ago, they said, if you would want somebody to remember you a certain way, what would you want them to remember you by? And I thought about my kids. And I thought to myself, I would want them to remember me as somebody who, if he had an idea, that he was willing to pursue it. Not that it always worked out, not that it always went according to plan, not that he was always a success, but that he always strove towards those ideas and just let it go where it was going to take him. That's meaningful to me. But I also think fear's not a bad thing.
Mm-mm.
Everybody gets like, oh, fear, I don't want to be afraid. Well, maybe you should be afraid. If you just put a period on the end of it, that's a problem. But if you put a comma on it, I'm afraid, period, that's a problem. I'm afraid. And because I'm afraid, I'm going to do ... Fear can actually drive you to make really good decisions.
Yeah.
Or it can drive you to make bad decisions or no decision at all, but you get to choose. So when you're faced with the fear of starting a new business, you could say, well, I'm not going to do that at all because it's going to put me at risk. Or, hey, you know what? If I start a new business, we're going to struggle financially for 6 months to a year. So I'm going to build up my emergency fund We're going to cut back expenses. We're going to do that now. And that way it won't be as hard for us as we continue to pursue through this thing. So the fear drove you to a productive, healthy set of actions. If you didn't have the fear, you'd be reckless, and that would be a problem.
Yeah. I mean, if you study the science of quote unquote motivation, fear of loss is a much larger motivator than pursuit of gain.
As long as, again, I want to reiterate. So fear
But
of
there's
loss,
a healthy,
let's say there is
balance.
Like I've had guys who, maybe they've had a divorce or they've had a bad relationship. And so they're afraid of getting into another one. Obviously, of course, no one would expect you to be anything but. So a lot of men will completely cut themselves off from future romantic relationships.
Mm.
Well, that's not a healthy way to deal with anything. Instead, why don't you try to figure out what you did or didn't do that you can change or you can improve and how you can get better. So when the next woman comes into your life, the dynamic, the relationship is different than the first one because you're a different person. It's like that old, that quote, no man steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river and he is not the same man. Mm. Like become a new man, learn something new, get better because of your scenario, and don't withdraw and retreat, but move forward with a newfound skill set and conviction that you can do it.
I love that.
All right, brother, let's wrap it up. We went a little longer today, but good questions. So wanted to get through them.
Yeah. Hey, can I just throw out a thing? One of the questions was from Man in the Making. And let me tell you that for me and my relationship with my boys, Austin and Brody, right? They're 13 and 12. And every car ride now, that's what we put on. If we're going to school, we're going to baseball practice, I pick them up. And like, I'm already a pretty good communicator with them and do a lot of things with them. But it's really taken everything to that next level of like, man, we're having more meaningful conversation. You'll ask a question of Brecken or he'll ask a question that he wanted to cover and I hit pause and we discuss it. And then we listen to your answers.
That's awesome.
It's created so much great dialogue for us. I want to throw that out there so the guys here hear it. If they're not doing that already, you should be doing that with your sons. That's opinion.
Awesome. We did you listen to the one we released on? I think it was Friday. We've gotten a little behind, but we released on Saturday, I think.
I'm not sure because they just go. And they're like, I'm just kind of pausing and listening and then they keep going. And so I don't know which one we're in or
you would know because we read your review on the podcast.
No, I didn't. No, we haven't.
So you're not to that one.
That's funny. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. What you just said, we read on the podcast because we thought that was pretty cool what you guys are doing.
Oh, okay, cool. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Guys, that's Man in the Making. So Man in the Making podcast. So go check that out. All right, guys. We appreciate your questions. Good, solid questions today. Hopefully it helped. That's our goal. Whether you agree or not, we're trying to put this information out there and do good and help us all become more effective, more capable men. So please continue to share, leave your questions, share the podcast, leave the rating and review, and get after it. That's it. All right, guys, we'll be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.